Hello, hello. Thank you for joining me. This is my final day sharing the passages that are most prominent to me and my synthesis of the focus topics from book number 30 in my Book a Week series, Alan Watts, Out of Your Mind. I want to quickly address something that may be of value to some. It is a mode of thinking or interaction with my thoughts when I notice that I'm not enjoying the activities of my day. This typically happens when I am engaging in chores or when something has happened that I haven't fully processed and it's kind of an unresolved undertone to my mood. Or when I'm in a rush. It's characteristic of trying to move more quickly than is natural for me. What I try to do under these circumstances is ask myself the following questions. Can I find a way to enjoy this? To insert joy into what is happening right now without altering any of the circumstances that are quite obviously given in what is happening right now. And what inevitably follows is the memory that that this is it. Nirvana is available to us right here. That I have an opportunity that I may miss to really dig this, to enjoy this right here, right now, without altering it. And inevitably, what I notice is that when I get myself to this mode of inquiry, my response is yes, I can enjoy this. I will enjoy this. It comes in surrendering to an understanding that the human condition involves these sensations of moving against the current, and that is, in essence, part of moving with the current. It's a little bit of a swirl within the current, but nevertheless, the whole stream or river is moving downstream, despite the way it feels at the moment. So this surrendering comes from the repetition of my study and my recollection of the inevitability of these types of conditions in my human form. And the more I repeat these neurological pathways, the more easily I glide down them. So I want to share this today because this is, each and every time I do it, I know that I'm really lubricating those neural pathways such that the next time I encounter similar circumstances, my glide will be even easier. And I have an added texture of the comedy of the peekaboo as I notice that I've forgotten and that I get to again remember, and I always accompany that peekaboo with the inevitable laughter that it deserves. I'm gonna loop this into my first reading for the day. I'm on page 125. The important you is perfectly indestructible. Our comings and goings, fortunes and misfortunes are all a sort of mirage. And the more we know about them, the more we know about the world, and the more diaphanous it seems. Everything in the world has the characteristics of smoke. If you look at smoke through a sunbeam, it's full of whorls and designs and all kinds of marvelous things. And then it disappears. Everything is just like that. There are two attitudes you can take about this state of affairs. On the one hand, you can see it all as lousy. You're given all of these feelings of love and attachment and joy, but eventually your teeth drop out, your eyes become feeble, you get cancer or cirrhosis of the liver or something like that, and it all falls apart, and it's too bad. So you decide not to get attached to things. You don't enjoy life, and you hold life at arm's length like a jilted lover. On the other hand, you can see the weaving of the smoke as incredibly beautiful, provided you don't try to lean on it. You can see it all as wonderful as long as you don't try to preserve it or catch hold of it. That's when you destroy it. In exactly the same way, there's really nothing in the way of form that you can lean on or grasp. And if you see that, then the world of forms is very beautiful if you let it go. Without further ado, I'll move on toward today's readings. Enjoy.
Page 122. Think of the nerves in your body. There are billions and billions of them. Now imagine that at the end of each nerve is a little eye that gets impressions of the world and sends the information back to the central brain. This is more like the Hindu idea. Each person, animal, rock, blade of grass, and so on, is an eye that looks out of one central self. Well, it's easy to see the connection between a single nerve and the brain, but it's much more difficult to see the connection between one individual human and another. We're not rooted to the same ground like trees, so it's easy for me to form the impression that I am only what is inside my bag of skin and that myself is a different self from yourself. In other words, it seems like we're fundamentally disconnected. However, in Hindu thought, each one of us is the works. Page 125. If your parents had never met, would you be here? If your parents met other people and had children, would one of those children be you? Of course it would. See, you can only be you by being someone, but every someone is you. Every someone is I. Everybody feels that I in the same way. It's the same feeling, just as blue is the same color everywhere. That I-ness is the most fundamental thing in people and in the universe. Our I comes out of the central I like a single stem on a larger branch on an enormous tree. And this is why Hindu deities are shown with so many arms and faces. All arms are the arms of the divine. All faces are its masks. Page 128. When you examine vibration, particularly if you view vibration as a wave motion, you find a very peculiar thing. There's no such thing as half a wave. In nature, we never find crests without troughs or troughs without crests. No sound occurs unless there are beats and the intervals between them. This wave phenomena is happening on ever so many scales. The fast wave of light, the slower waves of sound, and there are all sorts of other wave processes, such as the beat of the heart, the rhythm of breath, waking, sleeping, the movement of human life from birth to maturity to death. And the slower the wave goes, the more difficult it is to see that the crest and trough are inseparable. And this is how we become persuaded in the game of hide and seek. So we see the trough go down, 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 think it keeps going forever, that it will never rise back up again into a crest. We forget that trough implies crest and crest implies trough. There's no such thing as pure sound. Sound is sound, silence. Light is light, darkness. Light is pulsation. Between every light pulse, there is the dark pulse. The secret to waking up from the drama, all these endless cycles, is to realize that only the present exists. It's the only time there is. And when you become awake to that, boredom ends and you are delivered from the cycles. Not in the sense that they disappear, but that you no longer go through them. Well, you do go through them, but you realize they're not going anywhere. And you don't even try to hurry up and get to the end of it all faster, because just like music, the point of listening isn't to get to the end of the piece. You can sit back with interest and let it all be. You can look at every little detail of life in a new way, saying, oh, look at that. By living totally here and now, One's eyes are opened in astonishment. Page 139. See, it's not fun to be happy and not know it. We need a certain resonance. Self-consciousness is an echo in our heads, an echo of what we do, but wouldn't be aware of doing if there weren't an echo. So self-consciousness is neurological resonance. However, resonance can get troublesome if it's not properly worked out. You can get echoes that won't stop. You go into a great cave somewhere and shout, "Hi!" and it just keeps repeating "hi" forever off in the distance. And that's very confusing. It's the sort of snarl that self-consciousness can get into, and we call this anxiety. When I keep thinking over and over again, did I do the right thing? If I'm constantly aware of myself in a kind of anxious, critical way, my resonance becomes too high, and I get confused and jittery. But if you learn that self-consciousness has limits, that self-awareness cannot possibly enable you to be free of making mistakes, you can learn to be spontaneous in spite of being self-aware, and you can enjoy the echo. So, how can an individual realize that they are the universal self? In what way can a person who is under the impression that they are a separate individual enclosed in a bag of skin effectively realize that they are Brahman? This, of course, is a curious question. It proposes a journey to the place where you already are. Now, it's true that you may not know that you are there, but you are. And if you take a journey to the place where you are, you will visit many places other than the place where you are. And perhaps you find, through some long experience, that all the places you go to are not the place you wanted to find. It may occur to you that you were already there in the beginning. And that is the Dharma, or method, as I prefer to translate the word. That's the method that all gurus and spiritual teachers fundamentally use. So, they are all tricksters. Of course, strictly speaking, there's no method to arrive at the place where you already are. No amount of searching will uncover the self, because all searching implies the absence of the self, the big self, the self with a capital S. So to seek it is to thrust it away, and to practice a discipline to attain it is to postpone realization. Page 145. Do you know what happens when you try to always be on the alert? You think about being alert. You're not alert. And you're a hopeless prey to the enemy. So the trick is to be simply awake and relaxed. Then, all your nerve ends are working, and whenever the attack comes, you're ready. The great teachers liken this to a barrel of water. The water sits there in the barrel. And as soon as you put a hole in the barrel, the water just falls out. It doesn't have to think about it. In the same way, when the mind is in a proper state, it is ready to respond in any direction without any sense of being taut or anxious. And the minute anything happens, it's right there, because it didn't have to overcome anything, like coming back from the opposite direction to respond to an attack. And see, if you're set for the attack to come from over there and it comes from here, you have to pull back from there and come here, but by then it's too late. So sit in the middle. Don't expect the attack to come from any particular direction. In yoga, you can be watchful and concentrated and alert, but all that will ever teach you is what not to do, how not to use the mind. You have to just let it happen, like going to sleep. You can't try to go to sleep. It's the same with digesting your food. You can't try to digest your food. And it's the same with liberation. You have to let yourself wake up. Page 155. The egocentric being is always in its own trap. The Buddha saw that all his yoga exercises and ascetic disciplines had just been a way of trying to get himself out of the trap in order to save his own skin, in order to find peace for himself. Well, he realized that this is an impossible thing to do because the motivation behind everything ruins the project. The Buddha found out that there was no trap to get out of except himself. Trap and trapped are one. And when you understand that, there isn't any trap left. Page 158. When you practice this meditation, you discover that there isn't any way to actually be absent-minded. All thoughts are in the present and of the present. When you discover that, you approach samadhi. Among all the sects of Buddhists and Hindus, you'll find different ideas of what samadhi is. Some people think of it as a trance, some call it a state of consciousness with no content. That is, knowing with no object of knowledge. Some say it's the unification of the knower and the known, but the samadhi of which the Buddha spoke is the gateway to nirvana. It's the state in which the illusion of the ego as a separate thing disintegrates. Page 169. When you discover that there's nothing to cling to and that there isn't anybody to cling to them, everything's quite different. It becomes amazing. Not only do all your senses become more wide awake, you feel almost that you're walking on air, but you also finally see that there's no duality. There's no difference between the ordinary world and nirvana. They're the same world. And the only difference between them is a point of view.